Okay, so you ever get that feeling, when you're like scrolling through your phone and you're just bombarded with all these like online debates?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And there's that one word that keeps popping up. A word that everyone seems to be using, but it feels like no one really agrees on what it actually means.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like, it's got all this baggage, right?
Tons. And the word, of course, is woke. So, welcome to the deep dive, where today we're going to try to cut through all that noise and figure out what woke really means.
I love that, cutting through the noise, because it can feel overwhelming sometimes, like trying to drink from a fire hose with all this information coming at us.
Exactly. So, to help us navigate all this, we've got some fascinating sources. We've got this academic article from the Journal of Dramatic Theory and Criticism called Empty Gestures, Performative Utterances, and Allyship.
Sounds pretty serious, right?
It does, but really interesting because it looks at whether people's actions match their words. Like, are they really walking the walk? I see. And we've also got an opinion piece from Spartan Shield that's taking a critical look at all this social media activism, which feels very relevant, right?
Super relevant.
Hmm.
And then there's the ever-evolving Wikipedia entry on woke itself.
Which feels like a good foundation because Wikipedia is always trying to keep up with the latest changes in language.
For sure, for sure. And to round it all out, we've got a commentary from the Independent Institute. They're offering some pretty strong criticisms of what they call wokeism, so that'll bring a different perspective for sure.
Excellent. So just to make our mission clear, we want to get a solid grasp on the definition of woke, trace its roots, and understand how it's being used in our modern conversations about society, both online and in real life. We want to bring some clarity to this term that everyone seems to be using, but maybe not always understanding in the same way.
Love it. So where do we even begin with something like this? I mean, woke feels like it's everywhere now, but it obviously had to start somewhere.
It did. And its origins might surprise some people. It's not just some recent internet slang. It's actually got a history that goes back decades. We're talking about African American English, possibly as early as the 1930s.
Wow, so way before the internet even existed.
Way before. And even then, it wasn't just about being awake in a literal sense, right? It was about this awareness of racial prejudice and discrimination that Black Americans were facing. The phrase "stay woke" was commonly used, emphasizing this need to always be vigilant, to always be on guard.
So like a survival mechanism almost.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't just about opening your eyes. It was about understanding a reality that could be really dangerous.
Yeah.
And this idea of awakening to a larger political reality was really emphasized by Marcus Garvey back in 1923, with his famous call, "Wake up Ethiopia, wake up Africa." He was trying to galvanize Black political consciousness, and that call to wake up, to become aware, really resonated.
Makes you think about the power of language, right? How a simple word or phrase can carry so much weight. And it seems like that call to awareness, specifically around racial issues, kind of continued, didn't it?
It did. We see it even more explicitly in Leadbelly's 1938 recording of Scottsboro Boys, that song about the unjust accusation of these young Black men.
Right, right. I remember that.
Yeah.
And he actually uses the phrase "stay woke" in the song as a warning, doesn't he?
He does. He tells listeners to stay woke to the potential racial dangers in the South. And it wasn't just about being informed. It was about protecting yourself, about recognizing the very real threats that existed.
Wow, so powerful and so deeply rooted in the Black experience in America. So then how did this term, which started with this very specific meaning tied to racial awareness, how did it make the jump to the way we use it today, this broader meaning?
It's fascinating, right? It seems to have started broadening in meaning around the mid-20th century, becoming more about being well-informed or aware, not just about race, but in a more general political or cultural sense. There's this article from 1962 in the New York Times Magazine called "If You're Woke, You Dig It" by William Melvin Kelly. The OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, actually uses this as one of their earliest citations for the word woke.
That's really interesting. What was the article about?
It was about how white beatniks at the time were adopting Black slang. So even then, woke suggested being in the know, being aware of what was happening culturally and politically, but not necessarily tied to any one specific issue.
I see. So like a general awareness of the world around you and how things work or don't work.
Right. And by 1971, we see even more explicit political connotations. In the play Garvey Lives, there's a line about staying woke after being awakened by Garvey himself. So you see that direct link to political consciousness and the legacy of Black activism.
Wow, so it keeps evolving. It goes from this very specific meaning about racial awareness to this broader idea of being politically aware, informed, and engaged.
Exactly. And then we get to this really interesting period in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Remember the hashtag stay woke?
Oh, how could I forget? It was everywhere.
It really was. And this is where the term seems to really take on a new life. Erykah Badu's 2008 song Master Teacher played a big role in this resurgence.
I love that song, and she repeats that line, I stay woke, throughout.
Yes. And at this point, Merriam-Webster, when they first defined stay woke in this contemporary context, they defined it as being self-aware, questioning the dominant paradigm, and striving for something better.
Interesting. So still about awareness, but not yet specifically tied to, like, social justice issues, right?
Right. It felt broader, like a more general sense of being conscious and questioning the status quo.
Right.
And there's this anecdote about the songwriter Georgia Ann Muldrow. She actually learned the phrase stay woke from a Harlem alto saxophonist named Lakeisha Benjamin. Yeah, Benjamin was using it more literally, like telling people to stay awake when they were tired. But then Muldrow put it on a t-shirt, and she said that for her, it evolved to represent this personal journey of self-discovery, like a search for her own truth.
That's really cool. And then, of course, the hashtag really takes off and blasts this word into the mainstream.
Exactly. And as The Economist points out, it started to signify a progressive outlook on a whole range of issues. Erykah Badu herself tweeted in 2012 about the Russian feminist group, and she used the hashtag stay woke. So it was becoming this digital shorthand for being aware of social and political issues and taking a progressive stance on those issues.
Right. So it's not just about being aware anymore. It's about having a particular perspective.
Exactly. And then comes this pivotal moment, the Black Lives Matter movement. After the shooting of Michael Brown in 2014, Stay Woke really took off as this call to action.
Oh, yeah, I remember. It was about recognizing police brutality and systemic racism, specifically against Black Americans.
Right. And there was even a 2016 BE documentary titled Stay Woke that focused on the movement.
So it went from this general call for consciousness to a very focused demand for people to pay attention to racial injustice.
Precisely. And within the Black Lives Matter movement, woke came to mean being politically and socially aware, particularly about racial issues.
Makes sense. And then it continued to broaden, right? It wasn't just about race anymore. It was about all sorts of social inequalities.
It was. It started to encompass things like sexism and LGBTQ plus rights, all sorts of inequalities that people were becoming more aware of. It became connected to the idea of white privilege and discussions about reparations for slavery, all these ideas that progressives were championing.
So woke becomes this umbrella term for this whole progressive worldview.
Exactly. And that leads us to the definitions we hear today. Gordana Lazic, for instance, defines woke as a heightened awareness of social inequalities and injustices.
Okay, so it's about more than just recognizing that these inequalities exist. It's about actively being aware of them and how they affect people's lives.
Right. And Aja Romano from Vox goes even further, saying that woke has become a single-word summation of leftist political ideology.
Wow. So now we're talking about woke as a whole, political ideology, not just a way of looking at the world.
Exactly. And it's centered on things like social justice politics and critical race theory, which is all about understanding how systemic inequalities are embedded in our societal structures. Not just individual prejudice, but systems that are set up to disadvantage certain groups.
That's a big shift from where the term started. It really shows how the meaning has deepened and become more complex over time.
It really has. And David Brooks, back in 2017, he made this really interesting observation. He said, "To be woke is to be radically aware and justifiably paranoid."
Justifiably paranoid. That's a strong statement.
It is. He was talking about this feeling of being cognizant of the ways that power structures are rigged against certain people, that there's this rot within these systems.
So woke is not just about seeing things differently. It's about seeing the negative and maybe even the dangerous aspects of how society operates.
Right. And then there's Marcelina Morgan, a sociologist, who contrasted woke with cool. She said that woke is different from cool because it's explicitly and directly focused on injustice. It's not about being detached or observational. It's about calling out injustice and working to change it.
Which makes sense given its history, right?
Yeah.
It was born out of the need to be aware of and combat real, tangible threats.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how this word, with all this history and these layers of meaning, then moved into internet culture. Andre Brock suggested that its prevalence on Black Twitter might be because it's short, which fits the platform's character limits. But then, as Charles Pulley-Moore noted, it crossed over into general internet usage around 2015. People were searching for woke on Google more and more, and stay woke even became a meme.
So from this very specific term in Black communities, it becomes a mainstream internet phenomenon.
It does.
Yeah.
And it becomes associated with younger generations in particular, millennials and Gen Z, who are really active online and shaping digital culture. And in 2017, the Oxford English Dictionary officially added woke to its pages, recognizing it as a legitimate and significant term in the English language. So it went from being this word with a very specific meaning within Black communities to this broad descriptor of a progressive worldview that everyone's talking about.
It's like we've traced this whole journey of the word woke from its beginnings to where it is now, and it's really incredible how much its meaning has changed and expanded along the way.
It is. And understanding that journey, all those layers of meaning, is crucial for navigating how it's used today. Because it's not just some fleeting internet trend, it has deep roots in the fight for social justice.
Right. It carries a lot of weight and history with it.
It does. So just as a recap, we've gone from woke as a term of awareness within Black communities, signifying the need to be vigilant against racial injustice, to woke as this broader descriptor of a progressive worldview that encompasses various social justice issues.
And it's fascinating to see how that evolution happened and how the term has been shaped by different social and political movements and by the way we communicate online.
Exactly. It's a reminder that language is constantly changing and that the meanings of words can shift and evolve in really fascinating ways, especially in the age of the internet.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just about defining a word. It's about understanding how language reflects the social and political currents of our time.
So true. And it makes you wonder, right? How will the meaning of woke continue to evolve in the future? What new layers of meaning will be added as the social and political landscape continues to change?
I don't know, but I'm definitely going to be paying attention.
Me too. And as you, our listeners, continue to encounter this word woke in your own lives, think about its journey, about its history, about its complexities. Because understanding those nuances can help us all engage in more thoughtful and productive conversations about the issues that matter most.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.
And stay woke.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Had to.
All right. That's our show. See you next time, everyone.